Well, it's Friday. You're going to hear some thumping and bumping, and that's just the way it is. You guys know how the drill is. Door's locked, don't worry. It's Friday. It's been, well, I'm getting these mail calls done. I like doing them. It's just a matter of time. Having to budget time to do this stuff. But I always like reading your questions and all that other kind of stuff. Rocket wants to come in here. He's just going to do a circuit. Come in here, look for any dropped food or anything else like that. Then he's going to complain at me about wanting to go out in the garage, hoping that I will leave him unsupervised near the cat box, which is out there, and that I won't do that. And then he's going to ask to go into the backyard, and I will open the back door to let him into the backyard, and he will then waffle about whether or not he's going to go in or out. Then he's going to go out, and I'll close the door behind him, and in 10 minutes he'll be here at the door for the shop again. It's just this loop he runs. Anyway, it's busy life, man. It's busy life. It's been the last couple of weeks, you'll notice I haven't been really doing much videos at all. Sabrina and I have both been working on getting up to speed on our vaccines. And so I got my second Moderna shot 1 week ago. I got my second Moderna shot 1 week ago. Hang on a second. I film. So if you're offended by other people getting vaccines, you're going to want to pause the video because I'm going to show myself getting a vaccine in my arm. And I understand that does disturb some people. So anyway, trigger warning, I'm getting a vaccine here. I can always trim it down.
And do you want this side? Because my hand will be over here, so we can do this side.
I just want to demonstrate to everybody that you're getting the damn shot.
Yes, do it.
Yes. Well, that teaches me. Actually, I have my sister-in-law in the car and we were talking.
All right, quick poke.
Or I probably would have caught that. You know what I mean?
Good.
So my after effects of the second shot weren't bad. I was a little sore on that Friday, and then the next day I had to take a nap for like 3 hours, and I felt kind of weird, but nothing bad. The only problem I had was gastrointestinal distress, which is something I'm kind of prone to, and it kind of kept going. So I had a lot of private time. As a result, I spent a lot of time reading. And I found a quote in this book. This fellow, Donald DeCarl, he was like a master watchsmith, like the real deal. He published this book, Complicated Watches and Their Repair. He published these in 1956, I think. Yeah, let's look at that pub date. Oh, come on now. He was British. Yeah, 1956. Anyway, so I was reading through all this stuff. There's some great material in this. Like, he goes into depth about mechanical watches that are perpetual calendars, like true perpetual calendars, that include a mechanical solution to keeping track of leap years. I mean, he just talks about how the mechanism works. It's wild. But he had a great quote in here. Lots of people ask, like, hey, I want to be a watchmaker, or I want to learn to repair watches, which is fine, which is great. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from him. It has been constantly stressed that the utmost care must be exercised while repairing watches, and when repairing complicated watches, that advice can now be doubly stressed. We have all heard the phrase cool, calm, and collected, and it can be applied to meet many occasions, but it has a real personal significance to the person undertaking the repair of watches. Cool, to be confident and assured that the necessary skill has been acquired to undertake such work. In other words, to be a proficient craftsman. I love that word, craftsman. There's so many layers of just, it's a great word. To be a craftsman is absolutely lofty ideal, and to be able to, for anyone to be able to legitimately say that they're a craftsman, that's a big deal. Next, calm. To be quiet and peaceful, not to be in an agitated frame of mind, to be possessed of great patience and some determination, and certainly not in a hurry or to be flurried. Absolutely. There's no such thing as doing anything with watches fast. Move slow. Collected. To have your wits about you, to be alert, and with an ordered mind, to be systematic and precise. Absolutely correct. This may sound formidable, but we all possess these qualities in varying degrees, and it is for the student to make himself proficient by acquiring through practice the mentality necessary to do the work now to be discussed. First and foremost, it is to be a good craftsman through constant practice at repairing non-complicated watches, then to automatic winding watches, then chronographs. It is essential to be able to fathom things out, to find out why. This statement has often been repeated. One must know how something works. One must know how it works, and it will be the aim when dealing with watch repairs to explain in the fullest detail each working part, so that if the craftsman were presented with a box containing a watch movement dismantled and in disorder, he would be able to reassemble it, build it up piece by piece, knowing what was required of each part. That sounds like a big deal. That sounds like a lot. That really does. But the key point, and the thing that really perked my ears up, when I first started doing this, I didn't know anything, really. I mean, I'd been a watch collector for decades before then, and I'd done a lot of mechanical stuff, but not really on watches. But I got inexpensive base movements, usually Seiko 7000 series movements, because they're super cheap and plentiful, and I would buy watch lots back then. You could get them for really cheap. And I would find, I started on a watch that had water intrusion. It was a 7005. I had water intrusion, and the movement was in worse shape, and it was completely dead. So I couldn't do anything more to it. It was already dead. There's no way for it to be more dead. So that was very freeing. So you go through the base movements over and over and over and over again, to the point that you have real familiarity. There's nothing that you look at inside the movement that really is sort of shockingly weird, that you don't know what you need to do to approach it safely. So that's the thing, is you just do these simple movements over and over, and you understand the core of what watch work is about, how a watch movement works, and you get so used to it, to the point that finally, when something is out of place or wrong, or the behavior is wrong, you can say to yourself, well, you can run the watch movement in your head and say, we must be having a problem with this, that, or the other thing. And the principle is the same, no matter how complicated you go. It'll be very confusing at first, but if you keep pushing on, you will get it. Okay, sorry, I just thought this book was really, it's interesting to have such good, basic, common sense advice in here that I myself had already kind of worked through, and it was nice to get confirmation from a master that I kind of started out the right way. Okay, we have, wrist check.
Okay, for wrist check, this is that nice leather I'm working with now. This is a locally sourced wild deer hide. Local hunter does this, and there's a little company in town that tans hides for people. Anyway, I'm thinking about stuff for the MG. Anyway, today's wrist check, I was so inspired by a customer's recent having me do their Seiko A829 that I decided that it was, A829-6019, called the NASA watch, or the Astronaut watch. These watches were literally used at NASA. They were used a lot in the shuttle program, not officially, but the personnel, the astronauts and support personnel would buy them down at the PX based on recommendations from other people, and it became an unofficial watch. It's kind of like a proto G-Shock, sort of, except that not being made of like an impact composite or anything else like that, It's all metal. All metal rotating ring, and the rotating ring controls all of the functions like that via little teeny tiny pushers underneath this bezel that go up and down as the bezel turns. It's just a really cool watch with real space history. It's really neat. This is mine, though customer's one, it's interesting. The customer's one, he literally worked at NASA. Like, he knows Gene Kranz and all those people. His example is only, God, less than 2,000 examples away from mine. They were both made in the same month, which was 1982. What was the actual month? Both of ours were made, March 1982. It's just a cool watch. Nice thing is as watch size popularity has changed. As they've gotten smaller, the watches that people will wear rather than these behemoths of previous times, is a little elegant functional watch like this just works out great. So anyway, that's what I'm wearing. Thank you again to Nick Restrepo. I'm going to have to trust him on this. He tells me that I bought this watch from him years ago. So I don't have a record on that, so I'm trusting him that that's the case. But man, yes, it is still here. Okay.
It's a cool watch. I'm digging it. I love that it's, that these actually went into orbit. Nick, I got this from you, right? That's what you're saying, Nick Restrepo. And I apologize that I don't remember, but where did you get it from? Do you have any history at all on it? Okay. Let's answer a few questions. El Choya. This should be called, in all caps, Spencer Klein's Seiko channel, all Seikos all the time. Well, I mean, it's going to be a majority Seiko, sure. That's the brand that I focus on. But there are other models. I talk about Omegas and Rolexes and other things that come across the bench. But yeah, primarily it's going to be Seiko. So thank you for noticing that mine is a primarily Seiko channel. Mr. El Choya. Aristides Lykunas. Thank you for your answer, Mr. Klein. It's nice you like Greek history. Man, I love ancient history. I love it. I love history generally, but I love ancient history. If you ever come to Greece, I would love to show you around. Man, I'd love for us to go to Greece. Up until then, keep up the great work and videos. Well, I'm glad you think it's great, and thank you again for watching. Man, I'd love to go to Greece. Only problem with going to Greece is I don't drink anymore, which means I can't really do what I would have wanted to do, which is eat a ton of good, freshly made Greek food with lots of ritsina. But I don't drink anymore, so that sucks. And I would have to believe that, well, it doesn't matter. Let's see. This is some of these questions I've been saving for a long time. Wristwatch experience. It's great when a watch unexpectedly blows you away. Reminds us why we love the hobby. I believe this was a comment on my blue 6306 Silver Wave video. God, what a beautiful watch. It's over there. My only complaint, it's JDM and it's non-loomed. I have to admit that I really like loom. I really like working loom. And if you get a good enough condition vintage Seiko that has loom, the loom still glows. For example, this watch, this 6105, my favorite, most beautiful 6105 with its 6309 handset, all the loom is completely original. It's original Seiko. But whoever had this watch work done, whoever owned this, had this work done, and then they put the watch in a drawer. And it has been sitting in the darkness. Oxygen has not been getting in. It has not been, nothing funky's happened. This watch still glows. Isn't that neat? I mean, not a lot, but more than enough for me to read it at night. Yeah, so I have a glowing all-original 6105. And speaking of that 6105, let's see, where did it go? Ah, yes, there it is. The Blanchard Watch Company. Very cool. Seiko. He's talking about this watch, the Astronaut. Very cool Seiko. I never knew this existed, but now that I think about it, Seiko made the racing version, Speedmaster SSBA 022, I think, used the rotating bezel as well. Seiko actually liked that rotating bezel a lot. The Giugiaro Speed Timer one has that rotating bezel. It's the one that was in Back to the Future. Doc Brown wears one. The Doc Brown Seiko. It has that thing where it goes. It might even be the same A8 type movement. $401. I'm gonna have to check it. That's a little slow. Anyway, talking about the Speedmaster rotating bezel, Ayrton Senna. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar who that is, but I'll look it up. Ayrton Senna wore one early in his career. Oh, as a racer. Is he a racer? Have you ever worked on these? No, I don't know. I don't believe so. Side question. Tell me about the 6105 8110 with the 6309 7040 hands. What's going on with this Willard? Oh, I'd love to tell you about it. And since I just dropped my questions, I'm going to have to stop this anyway. So let's talk about it. Okay, as I said, Blanchard Watch Company. I'm always waiting for somebody to ask me about this watch and say, well, what the hell is the deal with that? So for those of you who maybe are less familiar with this model than some other people may be, this is a 6105 8110. This, minus the bracelet, is what they look like when they're stock. This is 100% stock. That's a completely original watch. So the main difference between these two that I'm sure anybody can tell is the handset. The 6105s were issued with this top light hand here, and then basically straight bar hands, 60s style hands with big lume windows, which was, nice. And it's a lot more lume than you would see from like a dress watch of the same era. So I'm sure that amount of lume seemed totally fine to Seiko. Like, for example, here's a 1968 Navigator 6117. And that was considered a pretty radical amount of lume. So this was a ton. But here's the thing, Seiko didn't stock replacement parts for real long. And these watches, these 6105s, they had, because the crowns are not screw down and they're sealed one-piece crown, once the seal dies in, 5 or 6 years, you have to replace the entire crown. And so Seiko ran out of crowns, or people didn't want to do that when they were working on the watches. And then you would then have an ineffective crown. You'd start getting moisture, condensation inside here. And these hands would die, and then the dials would die. 6105s burned through so many dials and hands and everything. Most of the time when you see like an early post cancellation service on one of these, you'll typically see 6139 chronograph hands, and that's pretty normal. Or there's a version of these hands that have slightly thinner and shorter lume windows. There's another set of hands that look just like this, but the peak is right down the middle of the gabled handset. Those I see. Now this. So here's the deal. This watch was an original Seiko, completely original, and it was serviced a long, long time ago. I think in the 1990 or something. I don't remember, but it was late enough ago that almost all the original spare parts had been discontinued. But it was not so long ago that there was nothing available. And at that time, 6309 hands were still available. This is how the watch came to me, except it had a 6119 movement in it. Day wheel here was black. It had the wrong crown, wrong stem. But the rest of it, it looked like this. And I was like,
and I had to get it. It was non-running and all this other kind of stuff because I could tell that they were all original Seiko parts, and I'm like, because it's not easy to find a set of original 6309 hands, the correct ones with the right angle on the metal, and that's what these were. And this was clearly an original dial, so I went for it. I have to do a little more work to brighten up that Seiko there. Anyway, but it showed up, and sure enough, as I had suspected, it was a sort of a mid-period restoration, and the parts houses would send what they had, or what Seiko said they should send as a substitute if the original part wasn't there. And so this watch, and I will stand on any number of sacred texts that you want me to. I will swear this watch was original is that my history for it is correct. And so this thing got serviced, and they put a set of 6309 hands on it. And I have to say, I was just really blown away by how much having this handset on there answered a question I didn't even realize was being asked. I like the original handsets on these. I think they're clean. I think, though, that they're sort of lost and overwhelmed in the sort of the bigness of the dial. It's like you've got, I don't know, two different aesthetics going on. Still, big loom plots, but then, the smaller hands. With these, there's more balance, if you ask me. There's more more balance to the elements. The loom sizes, the size of the window versus the markers, they're much closer. The difference of the geometric shapes just works so perfectly with all of the 6105 elements. It's crazy. I was looking at it. I'm like, I have a hard time believing that that this handset wasn't designed with someone half thinking about a dial like this. And I just loved the way it looked. And so, a lot of people were like, "Man, you're not gonna keep those. You're gonna put stock hands on." I have no idea how many 6105s I've owned. None. I mean, many. In any case, and I love them. It's the most beautiful case shape in the entire world. I swear, I'll swear on that too. It's Seiko's utter masterpiece. It's such a beautiful case design. Not just the asymmetry, but all of these complex, beautiful curves and the way that the crown guard is in this extension that it's just the coin edge bezel. This is like, Seiko should be making this exact watch today, not the reproductions that they've sent out, every single one of which is subtly incorrect in a bunch of teeth-chattering ways. They should, they should make this watch. But even though I do love them as much as I do, I never really wore them. And again, because I think I was underwhelmed by the perceived mismatch between the hands and the dial. So, but when I wear this watch, with this handset, I feel like I'm wearing a perfect watch. And so the last thing, again, that people were saying, oh, why don't you put an original, correct set of hands back? Or don't you feel that this watch has sort of been Frankenstein or something? This is a service set of hands. They were put on during a service. They were made by Seiko. They're genuine Seiko. And the watch itself is hugely improved by having those there. And since it was done during the course of a service, not for a mod, and it's all Seiko, I can say, you know what? This is the watch. There it is. And I'm going to keep it that way. Isn't that neat? I think it's neat. Okay, thank you.
Watch. And I just love it. And I mean, I have my other one, my fully stock one, right next to this one. And I really have to say, every time I look at them together, it just hardens my stance that this is the correct handset for this watch. And everybody's going to be like, but it was never made with that. You're right. But it should have been. Alex Bergeron. So interesting. Thank you so much for your passion and knowledge. Everything I know about Seiko came from you. I'm so sorry. You know, great thing is though, there's so many people out there. There's so many experts. There's so much knowledge out there. I only know a little bit of it, and I'm perfectly capable of being wrong. I've been wrong many times in the past, and I look forward to being wrong again in future, because the great thing about being wrong, if you approach it in the right way, it's an opportunity to become right. So you learn how you're wrong, you say, hey, wait, I was wrong. This is how it actually is. I strongly welcome those things. So hopefully you haven't learned any things that I've needed to unlearn. You deserve so much more viewers. I don't know. I don't put a lot of work into what you guys deserve, so I don't know about deserve. I sort of patching you guys along. God bless you and your family, and true to you as well. Thanks again for Montreal. Oh, I never followed up. So I got my 2 COVID shots. Sabrina got her second shot yesterday. So today she's wicked sore, like just super duper sore and kind of dizzy. She's doing better now, but I had to really be there for her. We'll see how the rest of the weekend goes. Mark 1. Dear, why doesn't this Seiko have the classic spring and balls? Talking about the Seiko 7002 click balls. I have 2 Seiko 7002s, one with clicks like yours and one with the spring and the ball. Why on the same model 2 types of clicks? Thanks, 19. The way that it worked, and there is a reason for that. Seiko had in the 7002s, they had 2 versions. They had the standard 150 meter version, which was again 150 meters. It had a bidirectional rotating ring, date, water 150 meter resist text on the dial. That's what they started with. Then the ISO standards for what classed a professional diver, what was a dive watch, changed. And because the new thing mandated that it have a unidirectional bezel so that you couldn't accidentally knock the bezel and add time when you're underwater, because that would of course lead to premature death by suffocation and drowning. So you change the ring so it only rotates one way. Seiko came out with those like a little earlier than midway through the 7002 run, but they made both of them through the entire course of the 7002 run. They made the transitionals, the 200 meter transitionals. That was the other thing that ISO did, is that they said, oh, well, this one's 200 meters. They didn't actually change anything in terms of the case, as far as I know, besides the crystal being a half a millimeter smaller. And that, I always thought, was because they had to make the rotating ring beefier, because now instead of just having a click and a ball like the 6309, it has a set of nesting springs that click upwards against a much thicker rotating ring that has catches on the bottom. So as far as I know, they're not really, but besides the unidirectional rotating ring and the designation change from 150 to 200 meters, there's no difference between them. And the funny thing is that literally, they say your stock 7002, 150 meters, whereas the transitionals, the SKX, the later transitionals, I just totally blanked on what the transitional 7039, that's it. Instead of a 7002, 7000, or 7002, 7009, or whatever, or 7000, 7000A, or 7000, 7000J, the transitionals were 7002, 7039s. And but there's no difference. And so 50 meters more one way or the other, I think that tells us that the old 7002s would go deeper, but they just kept it at 150 meters. I can confidently say that if I ever make it to 150 meters depth, that's because I'm going to be heading for the nearest land, which is straight down, and I'm not going to be coming back up. Anyway, that's why. Okay, question from Muhammad Haji. Hello, Spencer. Thank you for giving the time to answer your questions. You're welcome. I should give more time. Is there something that could be done when you have bad sealing surfaces, cosmetically, functionally? Like you're talking about pitting. You get a watch and it wasn't clean for a long time and has a lot of moisture was allowed to sit between the rubber and on top of the stainless steel. The stainless steel will pit. It'll rust like a bastard. It depends how bad the pitting is. Not really. I'm not really aware of any easy way to deal with that. I did know a guy once who was really good with a jeweler's lathe, and he had a watch that had terrible pitting inside the case, but it was a rare watch, rare Seiko. And so he put that on his jeweler's lathe and he spun it. And he basically used a very fine tip and he took down the surface. He machined away the surface of that sealing surface so that it was lower and it was all clean metal. He had to change the size, the thickness of the gasket, and some other stuff, but it worked. It worked. So if you have access to a jeweler's lathe and experience with it, one could in theory make it better. Now, if the pitting is in the case back, you need to replace the case back. That's just there. As far as I know, there's if you turned it down the inside sealing surface of the case back would seat deeper, which would not work. So, let's see. Randy Allen. This is a long one, folks, so stay with me. Hi, Spencer. Glad to see you're doing well and hope Sabrina is soon. Me too. It seems that you've talked about quartz watches a bit lately. Yeah, I've been digging them. And it's gotten me thinking maybe it's time to add one to my watch box, with GS being a logical choice. However, I have a couple of reservations and I'm hoping to get your thoughts on them. I'm thinking specifically of an SBGV 245 with the 9S caliber. My concern centers around service issues. Obviously, it will need a battery change every few years. Is that something anyone can do? Like typical battery changer to the mall or myself? Or should it go back to the GS mothership for a new battery like some Sin model Hydros do? Okay, you've got more to your question, but I'm going to answer this first. It's a screw-off case back, and you replace the battery, and that's it really, and you set it to the time. It's pretty self-sufficient, and that's really about it. It doesn't, like a Sin Hydro, isn't that the one that has the case that's filled with oil, so that it's basically uncrushable? So yeah, because those would need to be refilled and serviced entirely on their own by the manufacturer, because there's so many weirdnesses with the idea of trying to fill a watch case with mineral oil. So I wouldn't send it back to GS. I mean, you change the battery. That's what you're going to do. Also, I've heard watchmakers say that good quartz watches need to have circuits checked and other diagnostic procedures performed at battery changes. Well, sure, if there's a problem, absolutely. Especially for something like the GS, which uses temperature compensation. But I mean, they're kind of light bulby in the sense that they will work until they don't. These electronic circuits. I mean, you've seen me do lots of work on quartz watches. When I service them, I will adjust them for accuracy. And that's a pretty standard adjustment whenever you're going to go through a watch. You need to make sure that it's running at the right speed. I mean, you shouldn't need much more than that. Like if the watch isn't running and you need to ascertain if you have a blown coil or if part of your circuit is bad or something, then yeah, you'll need testing, but Seiko has all that information, like how to do quartz testing and stuff like that. I also can believe at some point that they would need cleaning and lubrication too, just like any fine watch. Yes. It's less critical with a quartz because they have non-stressed trains. Unlike a mechanical, you have the mainspring barrel is always turning. The wheels in the train are always under tension. They're being pushed. Whereas a quartz, you have a stepper motor and it goes blunk, 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 blunk. And except for the point that it's moving forward, the train isn't stressed. It just sits there. So it's less critical. It's just one of those things, but it still will need to be done to get the best out of your watch, especially like a Grand Seiko. I have one of these Grand Seikos, actually. Thanks to Ryan, I did a deal with him, and it's upstairs. It's a beautiful watch. Case finishing is gorgeous. The dial is beautiful. It's quite accurate. But the funny thing is about those is that I have right next to it that GS. I have right next to it my my Golden Tuno, my 7549. The 7549, which I restored quite recently, and I timed and adjusted it. Unlike the 9F or the 9S, it does not have temperature compensation, but movement was in great shape, and I've serviced it, and I timed it, and they're within a few seconds of each other, consistently just chugging along. So a good 7549 can be quite close in terms of accuracy to the 9S, but it doesn't have temperature compensation. Anyway, what would be your recommendation for service on one of these? The other worry I have is rumors online that the Seiko Service Center in the US is not always reliable, and would appreciate hearing your thoughts on that if you were available. I have not seen very many watches that went to the Seiko Service Center in New Jersey. I've seen 3 watches over the years that went through there. In every case, the watch either had not been serviced by them at all, or it had been serviced badly, and in one case, a 6139, they had actually destroyed the chronograph wheel because the person who did the work didn't know what they were doing, and they screwed down the chronograph bridge without making sure that all the pivots were in their respective jewels and or bearings, and they snapped the lower pivot off of what had been a good chronograph wheel. It cost the customer that replacement cost plus the servicing I had to do. They also, whoever it was, jacked up lots of stuff in the chronograph area. I had to do all kinds of adjustments and moving stuff and changing spring tensions to get that one working again. I haven't spoken to any of the Seiko staff in New Jersey for a good number of years now. And the reason for that is that I did actually call them every now and then. For a while there, I was working on forging a relationship with them. And then at a certain point, the lady to whom I spoke most often, but there were other people there, made it incredibly clear that she was completely uninterested in helping me or anybody else do anything. She just sounded like there were few things that she hated more than her job. And she was a professional. I mean, she wasn't just somebody they hired off the street. She was relatively high up in the food chain based on their org chart, which I went and looked for after dealing with her. They don't want to help you. They don't care. They want you to buy a new watch. If you want to buy a high-end Seiko that you can rely on for a long time, I have to say, you probably are going to want to go Grand Seiko because it's its own deal now. They're not tied, they're not chained to regular Seiko and their business model. They're tied to their own. So, GS, I support. Rest of Seiko. Last question. Dan Laser. Awesome job. Well, thank you. I want to thank you, Spencer, for helping me sleep at night. Well, you're welcome. I mean, that truly is a compliment. I suffer from pretty bad insomnia, and I really dig watch rebuilds. These videos, especially the long ones, often calm my racing mind. And sometimes when nothing will slow the thinking down, watching these videos will help with sleep. Rock on. Well, I'm glad. That's nice to hear, and I certainly do appreciate that. Not that you want any help from me. The U.S. military came up with a series of mental tricks to allow yourself to fall asleep in minutes. And I used to be terribly insomniac, but then I started following this process, even though it sounded silly. By gosh, it worked. You're laying there, your mind is racing, you can't think. You concentrate very, very much, very slowly on identifying all of the tension, any of the muscles that are carrying tension in your head, in your neck. And you concentrate on relaxing those, and just really you search your body for any muscles that are still trying to hold on. And you'd be amazed how many there are. And once you've accomplished that, then you sort of mentally explore your other muscles, your other body parts, and you try to make sure that they're as relaxed as possible. If you find anything carrying tension, you let it go, and you kind of sort of sag into your mattress, and then the next thing I know, I've been asleep for a while. It sounds silly, may not work for everybody, but it does work for me. The other thing you can do if you're having problems with racing thoughts, I just learned about this one, is if you look straight forward, but you're not paying attention straight forward, you're using your peripheral vision, and you're concentrating just on the peripheral vision. You're concentrating on seeing what's happening out there. It will stop your internal monologue like that. So that's pretty useful. I like that a whole lot. I don't know. But in any case, if neither of those things work, and this is unasked for and unhelpful advice, I apologize. But man, I hope I can help you sleep in some way. That's it. So next Friday, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see. Everything depends on this coming week. We're so close to the end with this whole coronavirus thing. And I have to tell you, I'm just like, I want to get out of here. I've been stuck in this house, this submarine, for what, 13 months, 14 months now. There's so much of this state I want to see. I want to be able to pile the kids into the truck and go camping and different stuff like that. It's not going to happen yet, but they're working on it. But the great thing is, Sabrina and I are both fully vaccinated, which means we can go to the movies, we can go out to dinner, we can do all kinds of stuff. And I'm really looking forward to it, and it did my heart good to see all the people absolutely leaning forward into getting their vaccines and getting their shots, because everybody who gets their vaccine is basically making an investment in the society that we live in. Rather than focusing on ourselves as individuals, we are a people, all of us. And so in my mind, the only true commandment that matters, the only true moral dictate that I myself follow is, in our path through life, do we make the lives of the people around us better? Do we do that? If we're selfish and we say, screw you, and I'm not going to do that because of X, Y, and Z, and there's no real basis for that, and it also potentially harms the people around us, the society in which we live, it's not, in my opinion, the right decision. So I'm doing this, yes, for myself and for my wife, and so we can go out and have lunch, but if we're vaccinated, we can't be carriers. As far as I understand it, that's what the science is saying now. Maybe that will change. That's the way science works, is you have a theory and you work to either prove or disprove that theory, and that's the way science works. There's nothing else involved in it. But right now, the evidence that we have points to that idea, that people who are vaccinated are not carriers, which means that we are, when we go out being vaccinated, having been vaccinated, there's no chance that we're going to infect anyone else because we're not going to be carrying it, which means that we are, just by being ourselves, helping to contain the spread of this horrible disease. I mean, look what's happening in India. Where are they coming from? Oh, it's Friday. It's Friday. I haven't been making these videos enough. Sorry, students are coming home. There's still some students that are doing in-person classes here. What are you going to do? Anyway, but that's the end of my lecture on civic responsibility and vaccinations, both of which are things that I strongly support. I'm a big fan of a sane, well-ordered, positive, town and population. I don't know how I got into that subject, but that's it. Anyway, we'll see how things go next week. And that's really about it. All right, folks, thank you. And if I missed anything, let me know. If I was wrong about something, let me know. If you disagree with my opinions, that's your call. But this is my space, my opinions. So there we go. Bye, folks. Thank you so much for watching.